OBSELIDIA was your first feature film. Let's talk about Sundance. A blind submission? Did you know anyone there? What happened? Okay.
Sundance was a submission on the last day of submissions, and it was walked in, not posted or FedExed. I walked it in by myself. I didn't trust anybody else to do it. That day, Diane and I had been given 2 tickets to go and see the Dalai Lama talk. And it was the last day of submissions, and I said to Diane, you go and see the Dalai Lama. I'm going to go and deliver the film over to Sundance. Diane went and saw the Dalai Lama. I went and delivered the film at Sundance. And when I got there, the pro forma is that it's in a manila envelope with a particular code number written on top that you deliver to the counter. And then that person at the counter of the office in Sundance's office in Beverly Hills, they take that envelope and put it in the pile. And I watched where it went in the pile, and I looked at the pile and I was aghast at the amount of envelopes that were standing upright all the way down this corridor. And I thought to myself, well, there goes nothing, because there were so many envelopes. I just didn't think we had a chance.
So yeah, we did not know anyone.
We knew nobody there. We just gave in a blind submission. Then when the programmers got to it, it was in a slush pile, and the guy had watched 4 movies previously, and this was his 5th movie to watch. And that was exactly how it was selected for competition at Sundance. He watched 4 movies, and then he got to ours, which you've seen our movie. It's pretty slow. I mean, there's less cuts in our movie than there is in a 60-second car commercial. You know, so he watched our movie after watching 4 of the movies, and then he decided that it was going to go into another pile, which was further up the food chain. And that was how we got into competition at Sundance.
And so we knew absolutely nobody, and we really, I mean, we didn't have high expectations. We just felt like it was worth submitting, you know, as you do. And it was the first thing we'd submitted it to. The film was not finished. We had not completed sound on it at that point. No. It was not color corrected. And so, you know, so we still had those things to do. And then I was out in Wyoming, and, you know, this was like a couple months later, and I was working with a director on a script there. And it was funny. It's just that funny thing with timing. Like, I just had this one night where I really, like, for the first time, I actually really doubted how we had made the film and what the film was. And the whole time making it, and you know, in post and everything, all the time, I loved it, and I loved the process, and I was just like, this is great, and whatever happens, it doesn't matter. This has been amazing, and I've learned so much, and I've grown so much, and what happens beyond this it's all fine. And this one particular night, you know, I just had this night where I was like, and I'm out in Wyoming, I'm in the middle of nowhere, and I haven't seen anyone, and I'm sure that fed into it, where I was just like, Diane, you've screwed up, you know, like the movie, you should have been more clever, you know, you should have got the name cast, and you should have done this, and you should have done that. You'll never get to do it again. You'll never make another movie. And the very next day I got up, and there was an email from Sundance saying, you know, is this the number that we can contact you at? And I remember I called you, and then I called Matt, and I was like, they probably just want to call to say, like, you know, thanks, well done, try again next time. Do you know? Like, I really was like, you know, they can't be actually, you know? And then I got that call, and it was, I described it recently in my blog. I mean, I literally, when it was Sherry Freelow who called me, one of the programmers, and I mean, when she said, you know, your film has been selected, I was literally sort of on the floor crying. And I think because I just had this really dark night, you know, I think I'd just been in that moment of going, you know, you did screw it up, right? And it's never going to be seen anywhere. And then that call came.
So with Rebel Heart Films and your classes that you're teaching, that you're going on the road, you know, I think you're going to Seattle first, is that right?
Seattle first, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
What do you plan to tell other filmmakers about that same type of moment where, hey, it's the last day and I've got tickets to go see the Dalai Lama? Do I take the chance and submit? And how do I know my film is actually ready? You know, I mean, you said it wasn't color corrected and the sound wasn't totally done?
Absolutely.
Okay.
The sound was, and I think, like, to be honest, festivals like Sundance, I think they're really used to seeing films in that sort of condition, you know. So I think, like, if it's, you know, if the cut is finished, like you've edited and you've locked picture, and you've just got like some things, like some technical sound, color to do, like, I think they'll be able to tell from that if it's a film that's for them that year, you know.
Sure.
I also believe in another angle of this question. The bigger the festival, I believe, the more seasoned and informed the programmers. And I think they're able to discern between something that's really truly unique and has a voice or a quality that speaks, and they can see that in first viewing in something that's not color corrected, that's not got sound properly done, that doesn't have music and all of the accoutrements that go with a finished film. I think really high-end, bigger festivals, that's not to disparage smaller festivals, because we've been to some great small festivals around the world, not just in America, but around the world. The bigger festivals have a more, it seems like, a more seasoned, more informed programmers who do this for a living. This is their profession. And as a profession, they're able to weed out, you know, the good from the bad.
It's also that thing that they're looking for something like authentic, something that's unique, something that's true, and something that certainly the programmers at Sundance said to me, you know, they said, like, when we watched OBSELIDIA, they said, you just see it's pure love, you know. And you know, I was so moved when one of them said that to me, because I thought that is how we made the film, right? There was never a cynical decision. Like, it was always that thing where it was sort of like, here's the smart thing to do, right? Here's what conventional wisdom would have you do. And we always went, but it's not right for us, so we're going to do it like this, you know. So we're going to cast our best friend in the lead role. We're not going to you know, go with the more named actress. You know, we just did everything in that sort of way. And I think that is ultimately what gave it the chance to stand out. You know, I think those programmers see thousands of movies, and they see thousands of movies that are trying to get into Sundance, you know. And I think our film wasn't trying to get in Sundance. Our film was just trying to be its own weird, unique thing, right? Which some people are going to love and some people are going to hate, you know, because it's just what it is. But it's certainly, none of the decisions we made in that movie were sort of geared towards how do we impress the programmers at Sundance, or how do we get a movie into there. And I think one of the problems for a lot of films, and something, you know, to me that really is a message that we want to impart to people through Rebel Heart, is just that thing about be true to yourself. Like, make the film that you will love, you know, and trust in that. Don't try and second guess what you think the programmers at Sundance are like, you know, gonna like, and therefore go, oh, well, we'll get this person because she was in another movie at Sundance 2 years ago, and oh, we'll get this music because, you know, they're really popular and people will think that. You know, don't do any of that. Like, really just, you know, it's like filtering out the noise in yourself to just find your own heart and your own true story. And I really feel like when you do that, and if you do that with an authentic intent, that is how you're going to make a film that's going to stand out, and that's how you're going to make a film that will get into Sundance, for instance. You know, but the more that you're thinking in a cynical way, or you know, sort of a manipulative way, I just think that's it. They see 5,000 movies, and most of them are doing that.
When I was making the film, I just wanted to. I mean, I knew it was gonna. This is my first film. It was either going to be. It's gonna make or break me, that first movie. And I just did my best. As cliche as it sounds, I gave it everything I had. I mean, I used to lay in bed at night, and whatever your higher power or God is, I used to pray to God. I would say, if I can't do anything else in my life, just let this happen. Let Steel City happen. I won't, just let this happen. Give me an opportunity. Because I was, you know, working on the script, and I had John Hurt involved, and you know, I was relying on the community of Alton. I had investors in Alton, and then I teamed up with a production company in LA, and it all came together in this very strange way that I've never had an experience like that since. And that was back when, so it all came together. We shoot this movie. I get a great cast. I'm in the middle of editing the film, and my appendix almost burst. And I'm editing, and I'm so into editing this movie, and I don't go to the hospital, and I wait, and then I get violently ill. So I go to the hospital, and I have to have my appendix. I have an appendectomy, and I'm like, oh man. And so then that happens in the middle of editing, and then finished editing the movie, and I'm broke. I have no money. So I start working in a warehouse and as a warehouse manager, and then I never really thought about Sundance that much, because we submitted to Toronto a rough cut and we didn't get in. And the thing in the voice in the back of your mind says, well, if Toronto didn't accept you, then Sundance may not accept you. But they were repping another movie. We had not them. We were working with a company called Traction Media, who was a producer's rep, and they had a movie called Half Nelson that was told they were in the very early on that Half Nelson was in, and they were repping Steel City as well, and it worked out. I got a call that we were in.
So you're working in this warehouse. You edited the entire film?
Movie's done at this point.
The movie's done. Okay.
Yeah,
and you were going to pass on Sundance. You thought, well, if we don't get into Toronto.
I knew. I would not pass. I mean, obviously, I was enthusiastic about going, but I'm working a 9-to-5 job to pay my bills. I was proud of the movie, and I did the production company submitted the film, so I didn't do any of the paperwork, and I don't know.
Where were you in your life when you heard? Did you get a phone call? Did you get an email?
I got a phone call in the warehouse I was working in.
Really?
Yeah, saying, are you going to be around later? And I said, I get off work at 5. It takes me an hour to drive back home. And my producer said, well, they're going to call you. When's a good time to call you? I said, well, I didn't want them to call me at work. So I said, after 6, I'll be home. So I get home, and it's the day before. It's like 2 days before Thanksgiving, or maybe the day before. I got a call from Caroline Labresco, and she said, would you like to go to Sundance? And I said, to ski or for the film festival? And she goes, no, we want to include your movie. And it was great. So then we went and celebrated.
So the job gives you time off?
No, I had the job let me go because I told them I needed all this time off to go to Sundance. And my boss said, what's Sundance? I said, it's kind of a thing for filmmakers. And he goes, okay. And that was it.
So you had to quit. You had to give him.
Yeah, it was like a mutual departure.
Right. Wow. So you come back. Then what is you come back to Alton after the festival?
I was living in LA at the time, so I go back to Los Angeles and taking these meetings and reading scripts and playing the game, and I guess what everyone does after they go through an experience like that, and looking for my next project.
And then one of your actors is given a nomination for, what is it, Best Supporting Man?
Oh, Ray Berry got an Independent Spirit Award for Best Supporting Actor, which was fantastic because he's so great in the movie. And when you make a low-budget movie and you ask these actors who have been working since before you were born, who have done all this work, you're so privileged for them to come do your little movie for no money. Seriously, it's a big deal when you have people that believe in you and they come, they leave their home, they leave their family, they go to a location, and they do your movie. And when they get recognized for that on a big scale, it makes it all worth it. And they realize that and they see that. Because so many independent films that get made that don't get recognized, they're due recognition or they're bad, one or the other. But I was fortunate that I got recognized and was able to open that door that, yes, I can work with these people again. They trust me.
So going back to those nights, praying to God, whatever, did you expect that all of this was going to happen? This is pretty amazing for especially a first-time feature filmmaker. I know you had the experience with the script lab or the contest, but was that the intention, or you just really needed to get the story out there? Was that more of...
I just needed some money to make my film. I was figuring out a way of who would give me an opportunity, a first-time director. I mean, I was young, and I was figuring out, how can I start my career? How can I, what's it gonna take for me to get this opportunity? What am I gonna have to do? And I just wouldn't give up. I mean, when I was writing Steel City, I was working the graveyard shift in a hotel in Century City, and I was writing the script longhand on hotel stationery. And seriously, I was writing all these dialogue scenes because I had all this time to kill. I wasn't allowed to have a computer. I couldn't write the script on the hotel's interface, obviously. So I wrote the whole first draft on hotel stationery. I mean, I had like 85 hotel stationery sheets of just scenes and dialogue. And I'll never forget that, staying up like in my hotel outfit writing Steel City. It's kind of wild to think about.
We really wanted to actually keep it out of the news until we premiered it at Sundance. We didn't want people going into Sundance thinking, oh, I'm going to go see this iPhone movie. Nobody knew actually until the very end of the film, when in the final credits it says shot on the iPhone 5S. And that was the first time anybody outside our small circle knew that this film was shot on that.
So then when you do the Q&A
Yeah.
afterward,
Right.
were most of the questions directed toward?
No, 50-50.
Oh, 50-50,
Right
okay.
now, what seems to happen in these Q&As is that 50% of it is about the tech, and then 50% of it is about the trans movement and how we approached that sensitive subject matter, and being from outside that world, how we decided to actually form a story, work with our actors, and make this film.
That was our first film, and we got accepted to Sundance in 2006, took it to the festival, and there was a very intense bidding war for that film. We ended up with seven offers on the table from, all the big distributors, and we sold it for $1 million. We had only spent a little over $100,000 to get the movie to Sundance. Okay, so we spent a year making it. We spent about $100,000 and change to make that cut of the film, and we sold it for $1 million. And I remember telling our agent at Sundance, our agent is John Sloss from Cinetic Media, I said, I'm really worried about selling our film for $1 million. I'm afraid that we're gonna be one of those infamous films that come out of Sundance like, oh, they paid too much and that movie underperformed, and like I didn't want to have all that. I was like, we should sell it for less. He's like, no. He's like, first of all, $1 million is not that much money for a movie. He's like, you've made a really good film that a lot of people want to see, so that's the right price, and you have it. It's we already have a deal. We already shook hands on this deal. What I didn't know was that after Sundance, Sundance is in January, and we were in theaters. We were in about 500 theaters that summer in June. We came out in June later on that year. We had a lot of work to do on the film between selling it and releasing it. We had to film out. We had to pay for that. It was $100,000, over $100,000 to film out. We had to license all the music. We did a lot more graphics. We did a lot more editing. It really started to add up. And by the time we were sitting in the theaters on opening night at the IFC Center in New York City, we had spent a total of almost $700,000. So, do the math. We walked away with $300,000. Now, that's great. I mean, if I could do that every year, I would do that every year. Unfortunately, that's not what normally happens. I think on a lot of these films, I mean, I hate to say it because it sounds really discouraging, but I think on a lot of these documentaries, you're lucky even to break even. And what we're finding nowadays is that if you don't have good partners when you go out to make these films, you're really going to be in trouble. On this film, we had, on If You Build It, we had great partners. The Sundance was a big partner. The John D. and Catherine T. MacArthur Foundation, Film Independent, the Candida Foundation, which is out of the East Coast, the Wincoat Foundation. We did a Kickstarter campaign. We won an Independent Spirit Award. We won the Bright Future Award presented by Unilever Project Sunlight. That was a $25,000 award that we won. I mean, we had an army behind us, really, to make this film. If we didn't have that, we probably wouldn't be sitting here in my house, because we probably would have lost our house. We probably would have had to sell our house. I mean, it was so financially challenging for us to make this film. Christine and I and our partner Neil Baer, you know, we've been at this a long time. We've been making movies, and Neil's a tremendously successful television writer and showrunner. And we thought we had it all figured out. And then we made this movie about a small town in North Carolina that took 3 years to make, and it was hard to raise money. I mean, it was challenging. So, you know, WORDPLAY was great, and we made money on that film. And we also sort of launched our film careers at the same time. But I think more often than not, these movies, you do them for other than financial reasons. And if you are lucky enough to make money on a film, more often than not, you fold that into your next project, and it's tied up in the next one. So yeah, it's great. If anyone is thinking about like becoming a millionaire, I wouldn't recommend making documentary films, because it's very unusual that would be the case. It could happen, but more often than not, it won't.
Well, just to talk about why we started SLAMDANCE a little bit is in 95 was in 1995. Feels like 1895. It was an interesting time in independent film. You know, there'd been this great crop of filmmakers, you know, Sundance filmmakers in the early 90s, and then by 95, a lot of the institutions of independent film were sort of going Hollywood. So that was the year Miramax became part of Disney. It was a year Fine Line became part of Warner Brothers. It was a year Fox launched Fox Searchlight. It was kind of the studioization of independent film. And Sundance was kind of part of, you know, that whole change, that whole, you know, shift. And as a result, they were programming much more second-time directors, directors working with bigger budgets and bigger stars, and that already had distribution. And it was kind of the Hollywoodization of Sundance, for want of a better term. And then we came along in 95, and we had just finished Omaha the movie, you know, we actually premiered it at what was then called the IFFM or IFP market in September, and in the previous year, Kevin Smith had gotten picked up there and discovered by Sundance and became Kevin Smith, you know. And so we all thought, all right, well, at least some of us here will go to Sundance. And as it turned out, that year, out of the 95 completed narrative feature films at the IFP market, not a single one got picked up to go to Sundance. And so we were like, oh man, that's kind of a drag. But at the same time, we had distributors telling us, good distributors, saying, we love your film, we want to give you distribution if you get into Sundance. And they said it with no shame. It was just very matter of fact. Like, yeah, we'll pick you up if you get into Sundance. And really Sundance was kind of all or nothing, you know, basically. If you got in, great. But if you didn't, you wouldn't get distribution, you wouldn't get your next film made, you wouldn't get producers, you wouldn't get agents, you wouldn't get into other regional festivals, you wouldn't get into international festivals, because they all used the Sundance Guide as the kind of handbook. So we had actually heard of a couple filmmakers the prior year, in 94, who had done renegade screenings in Park City when they didn't get into Sundance. It was Trey Parker and Matt Stone had their first film, Cannibal the Musical, which was their film coming out of University of Colorado. This is way before South Park. And then also a guy named James Marandino had a film called The Upstairs Neighbor. And separately, they'd done little screenings in hotel rooms, but had gotten a little bit of press for it. And we knew Trey and Matt had the same lawyer as us, I think, at the time. So we'd heard about these guys. And we thought, okay, well, that's an interesting idea. And especially and this is largely Dana Altman's idea, to kind of combine it with the concept of getting filmmakers from all over the country to kind of help each other and combine resources. And then we said, all right, well, let's stick a name on it and call it SLAMDANCE. And, you know, so we got ultimately a dozen features and a dozen shorts, and we showed up in Park City and did our thing, you know, and people loved our spirit and what we were doing, and it was a lot of fun. And even while we were there the first year, we actually put a deposit down. Peter Baxter, who's now running SLAMDANCE, he and I put a deposit down on, I think it was his money. I made sure it was his money. Yeah. On the Yarrow Hotel, which ultimately was our venue then for the next year. And kind of with the idea that, okay, there's this niche of first-time directors working with limited budgets who don't have distribution that was being left behind by Sundance. And so if it worked for us, why not help other filmmakers in subsequent years? And I said, that's a crazy idea. It'll never fly. We should just get out while the going's good. And then he's like, no, let's stick with it. And we have now. We're heading into our 20th year, and over the years we've shown, you know, it has been beneficial to a lot of filmmakers who, you know, I mean, I'm sure their careers would have been okay, but, you know, we are very proud to have shown the first films by, you know, Christopher Nolan, Greg Mottola, Mark Forster, who's got Planet Z or World War Z coming out. Ben Zeitlin, we showed his first short. Lena Dunham, her first short. Lynn Shelton, Drake Doremus, Oren Peli, you know, all kinds of. I mean, the list kind of goes on and on, and so it's definitely it's shown that there's a niche for SLAMDANCE. Even though literally by the second year, I mean, as early as the second year after we started, Sundance had kind of responded by creating by expanding their offerings. And actually, first it was called the Spectrum section, and then now it's called Next, but it's essentially the same idea. You know, they've added other sections, so they do show more films, and they show more films by first-time directors. And so I think we've kind of kept that pressure on them to stay more relevant. But the reality is there's still so many films, and there's still enough good ones that, you know, there's enough for everyone. So it's not dissimilar also from Cannes has Directors Fortnight, which started in 1968 or 69 by a group of disgruntled directors, and it's still going on, you know, 42 years later or something. So you know, it's a you know, we didn't invent the wheel. You know, it's a tradition in the film festival world, and it goes back to other art institutions for hundreds of years back too.
Kyle, thousands of filmmakers submit their films to Sundance every year, and only a couple hundred are accepted. So if someone came to you and said, I want to get my film to Sundance, what would you tell them besides, you know, great, fill out the paperwork, get the $100 check or whatever ready?
Is it finished or they haven't made it yet? Because I would have advice on both sides.
Oh, okay.
I think if it wasn't made yet, what I would say to them is, I feel like, and I'm guessing here, but I do feel like I've gotten to know the Sundance people over the years, and when I look at the films, I do feel like people argue nepotism a lot, you know, that like, oh, it's movies within the blah, blah, blah. I've never personally seen that, you know. I've never seen someone get in just because, in fact, I've seen people not get in that you would think that they should because of those nepotism things. I don't think that Trevor and John run it that way at all. I think they truly program off their gut. And, I mean, every film festival is a business, so there's always that side to it. But, you know, and that's why they have premiere sections and stuff like that. But I think when you look at the competition section, I think they just choose stuff that's bold. I think they're looking for something that's, you know, has some kind of unique identity to it. That's what I would say to someone. Like, make sure your film has don't try to make a movie that you think would fit the Sundance mold. You know, make a movie that is just of your own. And I think Next has really epitomized that. And why I think it's some of the most important, I mean, most exciting movies happening there in the Next category, because they're usually really, really unique identities. And I think that, I mean, I would say that to anyone independent of Sundance, like, just make sure your movie reflects yourself. You know, don't try to, even when it comes down to music or the way it's going to look, like, don't try to make it look that way because another movie did it. You know, that's always my least favorite question to answer. Someone will be like, well, what other movie do you think this movie will be like, you know, before you make it? And I'm like, well, I'm not going to, it's going to be the way I think I'm going to make it. I'll have illustrations to show that, but I'm not going to compare it to it. And I think that's the most important thing. And I think when it comes to submissions, I think you've got to formalize it. You've got to do the formal submission process. I don't think it, you know, there are thousands of films. I don't think it hurts not to pull strings, but I don't think if you have some way just to make sure to get your name mentioned, not to say that you should show up. I don't believe in, you know, that kind of thing. I don't think you need to campaign for your film. You know, I think the film will stand on its own, and they do watch the movies and everything like that. But to inquire or nudge or ask a friend to put in a good word or whatever, I do that all the time for my friends with other film festivals. I don't think that necessarily guarantees you or gets you in or anything like that, but it doesn't hurt to just for someone to remember your name and have it be said. I mean, that's advice I would say totally independent of Sundance, just for anything in life. Nevertheless, you know, to be bold and be persistent, you know, those things exist. But I think also the most important thing I think to submit to Sundance is to not expect to get in. I don't, that's not even, it sounds negative. I just think in a positive way. I put too much on myself. When my first film didn't get in, it was like crushing to me. And it shouldn't be. It shouldn't be. No festival should determine your worth that much, you know? And I'm glad I had that experience of not getting in, you know? I've learned to not let any festival be the indicator of the quality of your film, you know? Only you should be the indicator of that, you know? And so that's, I think, what I would tell people first and foremost. But, you know, I always say don't expect it, but plan on it. You know, if you can shoot your film a little sooner and have enough time to edit it to get it in time, like, try to do it. Try to do what you can to have it there and be placed in a position where it could be accepted, you know? Also trust that they are used to seeing rough cuts. They saw a really rough cut of my film, and I was really uncomfortable about it. But that's their job, is to see what the film is going to become. You know, festival programmers see rough versions of films all the time. And on my first film, I was like, it needs to be totally finished, and it needs to be sound mixed and everything. You need to know there needs to be no room for what they think. But I realized that it's actually okay, like that they're really tuned to that, to the filmmaking process and the post-production process. And make sure you're submitting something you can stand behind. You know, that to me feels like if you never get a chance to. People play their films at festivals sometimes and be like, well, it's still a work in progress. And I was like, no way, I need to, like, granted, of course you always want to make changes to your film, but I played my film at the cut at Sundance, which had very little time to finish. I played that there with the assumption I'll never get to touch it again. And financially, I probably won't. But, you know, I had to be okay with that. Where other people I know, they're like, well, I'm still thinking about doing this and tweaking this. I'm like, you probably shouldn't be charging people money to see your film then. But that's just my opinion, you know? I mean, everyone runs a different way. But in terms of getting in, that's what I think. It's a plan for it. Put your best foot forward. You know, submit it formally. Try to inquire if you can. If you know someone who knows a programmer, just, you know, say, hey, put in a good word for me. I would say just to do that, just to create awareness of the project. But having said that, and I've programmed for festivals before, not Sundance, but I watch everything. Every festival programmer I know, they do watch things. There's always this sort of angst about, well, will they really watch it or not? And they will, because I feel like the true festival programmer, you know, when you meet the people who have been doing it their whole lives, what they want, like I said, when I read a script the first time, I want to, like, when they put in a movie, I think they always want to love it. They want to discover that movie that, like, someone made in their backyard in Tennessee that's, like, unheard of and unparalleled and totally unique and creative. Like, that's what their desire is for. And so I think you want to keep that in mind, that they're not, I've rarely seen a festival programmer that's a cynic. You know, rarely. Usually they have that optimism of wanting to find something great in the middle of thousands of movies. And most of those thousands of movies aren't, you know, it's strange. You think, like, God, who made 12,000 movies? You know, and I think a lot of times they're really rough. You know, sometimes the movies are really rough and maybe aren't unique enough. But, you know, I do think everything does get considered.